good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Marketing Gem. This week we're looking at how customers can, as SMEs, can restore customer confidence after a web attack. Of course, this is big in the news at the moment, what with all the news to do with TalkTalk and MS's web having to take their website down last night for a couple of hours to repair a data breach on it, and also with Morrison's, who are being sued by 2,000 of their own staff after their details were leaked by an internal source to a bunch of external websites. So obviously it's a really hot topic, and this is a topic that's gone on for quite a while. All these big companies, whatever the type of resource that happens or breach that happens, they all have their own kind of ways and means of dealing with it, and they all employ vast amounts of resources at it. For a lot of SMEs, of course, you might not necessarily know what to do and how to do it. So what we're trying to offer today on the Marketing Gem is offer a few basic hints and tips that might just help you, first of all, prevent what's happened, but what we're mostly going to focus on is what you need to do after you discover that your data walls have been breached. As usual, I'm joined by a panel of experts, and I'm going to start with Jonathan Darby. Jonathan, hello.
Hello. Thank you for inviting us to take part this week, and hopefully I will learn as much as everyone else does.
I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge about PR and keeping all of those sorts of things online. And this is a subject that's quite close to Kevin's heart, because I've heard him speak about it on several occasions when we've met in the past week or so. And I'm joined by Kevin Lynch as well. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Hey, Diane. Thanks for having me on the show. Probably one of these topics where you're just going to stop. You've got too much technical overload, so feel free to, if I use any words that are scary or horrifying, feel free to just rein me in.
Will do, don't worry. Okay, so, Jonathan, I suppose for the first couple of minutes, if we talk about how you might prevent these things, how would you, you speak to people all the time about the collection of data in your role of marketing and strategy planner and stuff like that. How do you advise your clients to look after the data they collect?
Well, it is one of those areas where I would suggest that you go to people who have a lot of expertise and experience, and sort of aren't necessarily the cheapest people in the market. But the first thing you need to know is, have you got a website that is big enough and has the ability to collect data, and whether or not that data is going to be commercially sensitive to either yourself or the people who've given you their information. And just sort of make sure that you tick all the boxes that mean that, so if anyone looked into a breach, they wouldn't be able to turn around and say, well, actually, you've been negligent. So just try and make sure that you've covered yourself as being careful with other people's information. But I would guess the vast majority of SMEs, unless they're into some kind of e-commerce, won't actually have any really sensitive data, or at least we hope they don't. But yes, you should have the ability to, if you have got exposure in that area, to have a management plan in place to make sure that you are doing sufficient to keep it secure, and B, you should probably have an agreed plan with everyone you have working on your site for if something does happen and you become aware of a breach of security, that you know what you should do, and have a sort of an order of activities that you do to stop any kind of attack taking place. Or it may be that it's too late, but you should have a plan in place for what your initial actions are before you start getting into the repair activities in terms of repairing your reputation. But I think Kevin might have a sort of top line on that first.
Yeah, yes, Kevin. So you would agree with Jonathan, obviously, that prevention is better than cure, and it's one of these things that perhaps even as an SME, it's worth investing a little bit of money on to prevent these type of attacks to the best of your ability.
Sure. I think Jonathan, he pretty much intuitively put his finger on the right things to do there. So from my point of view, I would say, Jonathan saying, make sure you follow best practice. Well, one of the questions that's being asked about the TalkTalk scenario is, have they followed the Information Commissioner Office's guidelines on handling personal data? If they've done that, in terms of legally managing their risk, they're in a strong place. If they've followed what's considered to be best practice, then yes, it's a bad thing. Yes, there'll be penalties, but in a sense, they've put a good mitigation plan in process. It'll be interesting to see what comes out there. In terms of what sorts of things is the Information Commissioner Office. So the sort of data we're looking at here, the stuff that is the crown jewels, are things that people can use for identity theft: names, addresses, postcodes, mobile phone numbers, email addresses, credit card numbers, those kind of things. I've read of various markets where you can buy you can buy a file with 2,000 names and all the personal information for £50. This stuff has a real value and is really useful to criminals for all sorts of malfeasance. So I think at this point, the other thing I would say is security is not something you do once and you're secure. Security is a process, and you're looking at, what are the best practices in the area? Are we compliant with them? Do our staff understand the importance of security? For example, I think the root cause of the Morrison's issue was that an employee had access to information that he or she didn't actually need for their particular role. So, that's one of the things, who has access to the information. It's no good, if the owner of the business has everybody's salaries in a HR spreadsheet on their laptop and that gets stolen. That is an example where, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. This sort of information needs to be stored in proper systems where when people are taking it out, it's logged, and people know that it's logged, and they know that they're accountable for it, and that they have processes so if a laptop's stolen, some kid can't just go and get access to the PC and access that information. So in summary, in terms of prevention, everyone has a part to play. Good planning accepts that these sort of things can happen from time to time, and we have a contingency plan. Jonathan and I were discussing this earlier, and I thought actually Dido Harding, talking about the TalkTalk thing, I thought she did a very good job of, the horse has bolted, it's 10 miles down the road, various bad things can happen, and I think as a chief executive, I thought she was doing a good job of putting her hand up saying that this is a problem, I'm accountable. It gets to be less credible though if you're saying this continually, and as the owner of the business, you're the person that's accountable for this stuff, and that these things have a cost. Doing nothing is not an option, and really what you're trying to do is find out the standards that you can comply with, so that you've done the best you can in a cost-effective way.
Okay, so it's very much a case of, okay, let's assume that the worst has happened now, that we've done everything that you can, you've hosted your site in a reputable place, you've put in the right kind of firewalls, the right kind of support from experienced IT professionals who understand all this happening. But as we've seen with TalkTalk, or with Morrison's, or indeed with M&S, sometimes even the best systems do break down and fail and are penetrated for one reason or another. It could be a coding error, it could be dissatisfied staff, it could be through a genuine cyber attack. What's the first thing that you should do, Jonathan? Is it a case of just apologising, or should you apologise and at the same time say what you're going to be doing to fix the issue?
I think the issue with Dido and the TalkTalk case, well, there were two, I guess. One was that it shouldn't have been the third time And I think that we all sort of agree that there is a big danger of third strike and you're out. So if your customers have been inconvenienced once, and you've managed to rescue the situation, and you've put in new security, new layers of managed security, if you like, to prevent this happening again. It is very difficult if you're a big corporation, because some of these things, I suspect, are very well managed on the other side, on the part of the criminals, but some of them are quite easy to happen. But let's say it's happened to you once or twice. It's going to happen inevitably in the current marketplace and with current security, because people keep on finding new ways of doing it. But their problem at TalkTalk was, as I said, 3 times in 12 months. Sort of as the CEO, she should have been saying, look, we've really got to up the investment on security, because this can't happen more than once under my tenure. The second, I suppose, issue is how you manage the PR side of it, because she was absolutely right to get up and say, mea culpa, we are in a bad situation here. We are assuming worst case scenario and informing everybody that this has happened, but we don't actually know the level of the breach. Now the problem there, in a sense, is maybe she should have had a live feed from the experts, keeping her up to date with where they could get to, or say right up front, this is a live police investigation. There will be some questions that I cannot answer, but we are going to try and answer as many questions as possible, because I think she ran the risk of basically sounding like actually she didn't really know that much about what was going on. And in her position as spokesperson for the company, she really did need to be as on top of the subject as possible, and certainly able to answer as many questions directly that the journalists asked, and those that were sensitive to say, can I remind you that this is actually a live police investigation, and there are some things that we just can't answer at this stage. But so that's one thing to remember, is if you like, there is a sort of rule of thumb which is 3 strikes and you're out. So try not to allow it to happen. Once is unfortunate, as they say, 2 is twice, but 3 times really is unacceptable. And then, yes, I think you have to sort of say, right, one person has to act as spokesperson. One person has to take it on the responsibility of doing the public face of the business. And one of the first things that you have to try and do is inform all the stakeholders. So inform all the staff, inform all your customers, inform all your shareholders, and inform all your suppliers that you have been hacked, and that it may be that you have to suspend whatever activity you're doing on the web for a period of time until you get the hack sorted out and the security reinstated. I'd say that is the first rule.
Okay. Sorry, Jonathan. So Kevin, would you say that, or would you agree, you would agree with Jonathan, which is that keep the apology there, and then once you've apologised and say that you're dealing with the problem, then keep people informed as to how you're dealing with the problem in as near real time as you possibly can?
Well, that is that's very good, sensible advice. I think the killer thing here is we're now facing the 3 strikes and you're out rule. You can only afford to make this sort of mistake once. So if I was the owner of TalkTalk at this point, I'm going to say, Baroness Harding will have to be the face of failure for the company. And that, in terms of shareholder value of people who own this sort of business, I think the approach is going to be, can we find a white knight? Because, you've got a problem that customers are hemorrhaging. Just yesterday, I was speaking to someone who said, you know, they had problems with their internet connection, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, well, I've switched from TalkTalk. I'm now on BT, and I think it's going to, you know, it should be better," and so on and so on. So I think this is possible. I mean, not all the facts have emerged, but I think we're looking at a corporate calamity on the scale of when Ratner said that his best-selling item was a piece of detritus or whatever, no more valuable than a prawn sandwich. I think potentially the company is in that area. I'm not an insider, but you know, if you've had 3 serious security breaches where customer information has been leaked, you know, just what sort of customers are you keeping that are happy for you to be disclosing your information? Again, we don't have all the facts. We can't tell, but obviously time will tell. And you know, I think Dido is right to say what we do know is some information has been disclosed. Tell the customers to check their credit card statements for unauthorized bills and things like that. But beyond that, you can't really say much more because, as is clear, the case is an ongoing investigation. So.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, it's very much a case of, okay, the damage has been done, and now you need to start, and you've apologised. It's now perhaps time to start to try and redeem your reputation. And you know, as we know from all sorts of cases recently, reputation can have a serious effect on the bottom line. With VW losing, what was it, 6.3 billion euro in the last quarter through damaged reputation because of the diesel effects and scandal that's going on. And of course with TalkTalk, they've also lost a lot of money, but they're big companies. But if I was running a small company, I'd say, well, what's all this got to do with me?
Okay, I think, well, let's deal with trying to rebuild your reputation. I think that I'd be very careful about updating the stakeholders with information in real time. What I would try and do is make sure that there are real steps forward in terms of data security, if that's the problem, before going back to everyone. And then maybe you can give a statement, one statement a day for every day for the 5 days after you've done it. If you're a big corporation like Volkswagen or TalkTalk, there probably is demand for a constant stream of information. But from an SME, just keep it down to the essentials that you have to keep people informed with, and you know, sort of take advice on what you say. But the first thing, I guess, is to reassure people that there are no further risks at the moment. Either we've closed down the site and that you can't access it at the moment, but we will be back online. In the meantime, if you want to order product through our e-commerce or whatever, you ring this number and we do it in the old-fashioned method. If you're running an e-commerce site, seriously consider going to someone like, was it Amazon? I think we would recommend, and there must be a number of other people who would take it on. But for the small business, they will take on the responsibility of making sure that the data is protected, etc. And that's part of the fact that you pay a service fee for doing it, but that also covers you in terms of the risk and the insurance that you'd have to take out otherwise. So certainly don't be worried about using a third party if it gives you that added level of security and reassures your customers. And particularly if you do suffer a security breach, that's the time to review exactly how you're doing things. Don't try and do everything yourself if there is a high risk attached to the business.
Yeah. So
yeah, I just want to come back in on some of the stuff that Jonathan was saying. Unfortunately, these days, for most businesses, the website is the heart of the engine, is the beating heart of the business. You can't just shut off the website, and quite often the very system that people are using to do the e-commerce via the internet is also the internal system. So when these things happen, it's not, you know, we're separate from the web. The web is very much the beating heart of us. So it's really that whole area. I mean, basically, if you're an SME today and you're starting with a small business, you're going to look at using a partner to do e-commerce. We've mentioned the likes of Amazon, the guys at PayPal, various players in that market will do merchant transactions for e-commerce, and those guys, they will, for 5 or 6% or 10% or whatever plus £1, will do that process for you. So there's a very specific example of the cost of security. Now you can reduce those costs by taking on that work yourself, but you have to realize that in taking on that work yourself, you're going to have to lay out, and you're going to have to, it's not a case of hiring a programmer and, you know, sending the job to Elance and having it done by some Ukrainians or Indian or Chinese programmers. It's actually something that you own and that you have to maintain and keep up to date. Diane, do you have any thoughts on outsourcing e-commerce to vendors in other parts of the world? You know, do you think that's a valid approach?
Well, I'm not sure it is, because, for example, several charities I've worked for or have had lots of dealings with in the past, they've all had massive data. I say massive. They've all had databases with several hundred client names on it, or several thousand client names on it, and stuff like that. And that information is often secured on an internal server, and they have to meet the requirements of the Data Protection Act. So my advice would be that if you are going to farm it out, and I think you should, because it is a very specialised area, you should hire it out or farm it out to someone who is UK based and or US based, preferably UK based, because if you send it to the US you might have issues to do with EU data protection laws, and make sure that a person is qualified and reputable to do it. So if it means going to someone like Amazon or PayPal or someone like that, do it. Failing that, go to someone who has been recommended to you and who can prove that they have done this type of work with other clients.
Yeah, so perhaps Igor, the friendly guy who's very happy to collect credit card information on your behalf, maybe isn't really the true friend that he might portray himself as.
I think the data commissioner would look at that kind of thing and say, well, actually that's really short-sighted and stupid thing to do, and therefore you're in breach of the act, terms of the act. And of course now it's quite easy for people to just build up vast numbers of names and databases if they're doing, say, trading on Amazon or eBay or something like that, because they're quite often high churn, low margin type sellers. Yeah, so it is very much a case of go with who you trust, but go with someone who's got the right certificates and the right insurance, and make sure, in my opinion, make sure they're UK based.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is that you have to demonstrate, once you start to rebuild your reputation, demonstrate that you've taken the most responsible course that you can, and even if it costs you 10% of your margin, one has to sort of say that you're going to have to swallow it and live with that. But it's better to have the data secure than it is to run the risk of passing people's information on to third parties who aren't necessarily going to be acting in everyone's best interest. But I think you can play that to your advantage, in that you can, as part of your messaging to the stakeholders after the event, is that you can actually put together a positive story about the actions that you've taken. And there have been cases in the past of, not necessarily with data protection, but with other areas of when an issue has affected the commercial viability of a company, the well-managed resolution and well-managed expectations of the customers, etc., has had a positive effect on the business in total. So I wouldn't recommend trying to put your head in the noose and then try and save yourself after the event. But the better prepared you are for dealing with an emergency like this, and the better you are at making your case that you've done everything reasonable that you can to act in the interests of your customers and work, take the stress out of any potential that they could have in terms of worries about loss of data, the better. Now, I agree with Kevin that yes, e-commerce sites are the heart of what, the beating heart for some people with their websites, etc. But there are times when you may have to take that site down for 24 hours to prevent any further incursion. And you've got to be able to, be prepared to take that kind of business decision to protect your customers and to be seen to be doing the most responsible thing. Obviously, as quickly as possible, you come back up, and that's real life. But sometimes you'll just have to say, look, if we don't actually know how they're doing this at this stage, we've just got to stop it happening. And that's part of the reason why perhaps we should go to a third party in the first place, is never to have that kind of consequences. But every situation is going to be slightly different. And you just have to be prepared occasionally to say, right, this is a major problem. We can't afford to continue to have these kind of breaches. And we've got to pull the plug, bring everything to a halt, and then start rebuilding. I mean, if you're a major corporation, I don't think you can do that. I think you have to live with the fact that for someone like TalkTalk, you can't really continue to trade without a website. But for most SMEs, unless your business is 100% e-commerce, then be prepared for the worst.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that if, as an SME, you can plan about it, you can focus on being transparent and saying this has happened, and then working out a little plan about how you're going to keep people informed about the steps you're taking. I think that is kind of like my tip of the week on this particular topic, is plan for it to happen and hope and make sure and try and prevent it by taking the right steps at the beginning. So, Kevin, if you were an SME owner and you had one, what would be the one key thing that you would do to prevent this type of thing happening, or indeed to recover from this type of data breach happening?
I think the data breach is an example of poor security process. So really, you got to start from what represents good security. And my sort of tip there is the UK Card Association website. They have a link there talking about payment card industry data security standard, 12 high-level requirements. I'm not going to go through them all, but it says things like, restrict access to data by business need to know. So if I'm the chief executive, I don't need to know the names and addresses of all the employees. I just need aggregate reports. So by considering who has access to what information, you're beginning to have a secure thing. So that's my advice. Have a look at the payment card industry data security standard, and we'll tweet that link out after the show. Have a look at that standard and ask yourself what you're doing against the 12 points that they mentioned there. And if you've got answers that are reassuring, you can sleep well at night. And certainly, should the worst happen, you certainly have a very, very good mitigation that you can quickly get out.
Okay. Jonathan, what would be your one tip to an SME about data protection and reputation recovery following a breach of the data rules?
Okay. Keep people informed. Don't go don't just keep on bunging out information willy-nilly. Maybe one message a day, maybe even less than that, if there is nothing that you can tell them within a 24-hour period. But make sure that all the stakeholders are informed. That means your customers, your suppliers, your shareholders, and your staff, so that there aren't any people sitting there going, well, I don't know what's going on. Everyone should have the ability to, sort of explain where they stand at this moment in time, or as per the last communication that went out. Manage expectations is the key thing, rather than become a passenger in someone else's tragedy, because that's a surefire way to disaster.
Right. Okay. Well, you're watching the Marketing Gem. This week, we've been talking about how to recover your reputation, the steps you should do to recover your reputation following a data breach. This is a Link for Growth TV show, and next step is we're going to talk about tip of the week. And each week, I ask the members of the panel to give us a marketing tip. It can relate either to the subject we've just discussed, or it can be related to anything else in marketing. So, Kevin, what's your tip of the week?
I kind of went a bit early there, but basically the UK card industry's PCI, payment card industry guidelines, simple checklist of questions so that you can ascertain your degree of risk and vulnerability to these kind of data breaches.
Okay, Jonathan, your tip?
I think it sort of goes back to week 1, and it says, remember that every action that you take with your business has a marketing implication. So even if you don't really think that you are doing marketing, you're doing marketing by accident. And actually, it's much better to have a plan, an objective, and a strategy for delivering that objective in a marketing sense than it is to sort of carry on thinking, well, I don't really do marketing, I don't need to know about this sort of stuff. And again, that comes back to plan, manage people's expectations, manage for positive outcome, and by and large you will get there. And if you don't know how to do it, keep on listening to what we're saying, and or get in touch with us. Send us a message via Twitter, etc.
Exactly, and of course you can get in touch with us via our Twitter site, which is at the Marketing Gem, and we do look at all the comments that come in. And if you have ideas for a show that you want discussing, let us know again so we can cover that topic off for you. My tip of the week would be that basically to make sure that if anything does happen in terms of data breach and everything, you are transparent and you don't try and cover it up, because often the cover up is worse than the telling the people the truth about what is happening, because if you cover it up, it only enhances or increases the reputational damage that your site will, your company, your SME will suffer. So be open, be transparent. And on that note, it's time to say cheerio from me. Jonathan?
And thank you from me.
Thanks everyone for listening from me.
Okay, and we will be back next week with Marketing Gem, and as usual, we'll be talking on a topical subject to do with marketing. Hopefully it will be of use to everyone, and we will see you then. Okay, bye-bye.